Look at your most profitable customers. One of the easiest ways to choose a target customer group is to identify who your top customers are. Take a look at your accounting software or CRM. List your clients in order from the most profitable to the least profitable. You may also need to make some assumptions depending on how sophisticated your record keeping is. For example, you might need to use revenue as a proxy for profit. Here's an actual example of a case I worked on. The company had a software system to collect information on transactions and customers. I exported this to Excel and then sorted the customers in order of the amount of sales they generated. If you have thousands of customers, I recommend that you break the data up into deciles. By this, I mean 10 groups. So the first decile will be the top 10% of customers in terms of revenue or profit, and the last decile will be the bottom 10% of customers. Based on the statistical analysis I've done personally and the research I've seen, your profit is probably being driven by a small group of clients. 80% of your profit could be coming from just about 20% of your entire client base. This is the same case I described earlier, only instead of presenting every single customer, I'm presenting 10 clumps of customers. I took the total number of customers and divided that number by 10. That gave me the size of each decile, and then I added up the sales for each decile. I then divided that number by the total sales to the percentage of sales coming from that decile. To arrive at the cumulative percentage of sales, I just added up the numbers from the third column. So what does this data tell us? Well, it shows us that almost 37% of sales are coming from just the first decile. The first deciles account for half the sales. This has huge strategic implications. If over half your sales are coming from just 20% of your customers, then you may want to consider focusing just on that group. The remaining group might not be worth the effort. If you can get more people who look like that top 20%, then you may grow a lot faster. Now that you know where your revenue is coming from, you can do a cluster analysis and see what unites these customers. You want to ask, what issues were they facing when they came to you? What complaints do they have? Why do they keep coming back to you? What compelling event drove their purchase? Segmenting without historic data. The position a lot of startups end in is having to make a lot of decisions around target market definition without a lot of existing data. When this happens, especially if it's very early stage, they go back to selling to the audience they know rather than the audience that is the best fit for the product. Alternatively, they don't define the ICP accurately and try to target everyone. Neither is a good solution. Here's what you can do if you don't have any data. Talk to prospects. Identify where in the market there is evidence of underserved customers. And try to answer these important questions and take action from there. Where's your existing domain expertise? Can you use that to accelerate sales in a specific domain? And is it valuable to tap a local network first? Personas. Once you've identified your target market with or without data, you need to make a decision on personas. Personas are essentially a person you've created that represents your target buyer. The idea is you take your chosen company segment, identify who at that company is going to be the one who buys your product, and you create a person to represent them. For example, if you sell into mid-sized engineer-to-order companies, and the person at your target organization who's involved in every deal is the director of mechanical engineering, your persona might be Mechanical Mike. You'd layer on the demographic information that you know about Mechanical Mike. Male, white, 45 to 67 years old, married, etc. Then the motivational drivers. For example, wants to do a great job, lots of pride in his work. Then the stressors and pains. Doesn't have enough time. Hard to balance time at the office with time with his family. Lots of experience but not a big fan of change, etc. Finally, you'd package all of this information into a cheat card so anyone in the organization can understand your target audience. Personas can be powerful tools, particularly when they're based on data. It's often easier to create compelling campaigns when you have a physical representation of the people you're actually selling to, instead of engineering companies with over $50 million in annual revenue. However, be warned. Personas take an extremely long time to craft well. If you're strapped for resources, then there are usually other go-to-market priorities that should take precedence. The only thing worse than no persona is an inaccurate one. And marketing is often guilty of building personas that don't meaningfully help sales teams or lead to creative that forges a meaningful connection with the audience. Because of the creative flair needed to craft a great sticky persona, they often become traps for what marketing teams suspect or wish their audience was, rather than a useful reflection of what it actually is. Market sizing. However you decide to segment your audience, the next thing you need to do is figure out the size of this target audience to make sure it's big enough to reach your objective. This is called market sizing. Basically, are there enough of your target customers out there who can buy your product? Total Addressable Market, TAM. One of the best and easiest ways to market size is looking at the investor relations pages for public companies in your industry. Quite often, public companies will post investor presentations that do the work of sizing the market for you. Often this is communicated in terms of a TAM, or Total Addressable Market. For example, if you work in e-commerce, look at the information Amazon and Shopify publish for their investors. If you work in creative software, look to Adobe. Another way to size markets is to look at databases of lead lists. If you work in demand generation, you may have purchased access to a database of companies or leads. You can plug in the criteria you're looking for, such as revenue size and location, and the database will spit out how many companies fit that profile. Keep in mind that the number you will get will only represent a fraction of the market unless your database has every company in the industry. So you will need to inflate whatever number you get. Ask whoever manages the database to estimate how much of the market the database covers. If the estimate is 75%, then you'll need to extrapolate by dividing your numbers by 0.75. A third approach to market sizing is to use the data companies provide you for free in their advertising platforms. When you sign up for advertising with LinkedIn and Facebook, for example, they will tell you how many people or companies fit the profile that you're looking for. You can use these numbers to estimate how many customers are in your target market. You can also do the same title-based sizing based on government census and labor statistics data. If you're targeting an international market, though, this process quickly becomes extremely time-consuming and difficult. The fourth approach to market sizing is to look at third-party research. A research company may have already sized the market. Just look on Google and leverage the research that's already been done. The last approach to sizing markets is to do your own primary research. You could go out and manually count people, products, or companies, and then extract the sample you collected to the overall population. You could also do surveys and extrapolate your data in the same way. Keep in mind that there are a variety of different metrics that can be used to size markets. One is revenues or profits within a market. This information can come from different sources including Statista, investor relations pages, or from market research companies such as Mintel. Another metric could be the number of companies or consumers. Depending on your industry, other metrics may be even more important, such as order volume or pounds of material shipped. Serviceable Attainable Market, SAM. If your TAM is the total number of customers who could potentially buy your product, then your Serviceable Attainable Market, or SAM, is all the customers who could potentially buy your product that you can actually sell to. For example, if you make whistles, your TAM might be the global whistle market. But if you can only service customers in the US, then your SAM would be the US whistle market. SAM is usually geographic, but it doesn't have to be. You might sell design software, but only support English. Therefore, your SAM would be the English-speaking design world. Serviceable Obtainable Market, SOM. Finally, SOM. Your Serviceable Obtainable Market is the section of the market you can reasonably target and who you can expect to purchase your product. Your segmentation work from earlier or any other work you've used to identify your target market should comprise your SOM. As a good rule of thumb, your SOM should be at least twice as big as your revenue objective in a given time period. For example, if your goal is to close $10 million in revenue this year, then the SOM you need to do that needs to be at least $20 million. That's because you'll start to see diminishing returns once you reach 50% market share. As Jeffrey A. Moore explains in Crossing the Chasm, once you hit the halfway point, capturing the remaining 50% of a market becomes more trouble than it's worth. Instead, you should tweak your go-to-market strategy, relaunch into a new market, and do it all over again with all the lessons you've learned. This is called the beachhead technique. Pivot, the harsh reality of diminishing returns. All this work that you've now put in audience identification and segmentation comes with a vicious caveat. You're going to be doing it all over again and soon. Why? Diminishing returns. Diminishing returns are when your advertising dollars achieve progressively worse results for the same spend. Let's say you spend $1 million building awareness for your brand. Your brand awareness, in other words, how familiar people are with your brand, will undoubtedly grow. But it's actually very difficult and expensive to go from high brand awareness to very high brand awareness, so you may want to identify where that inflection point is. Here's an example. In month 1, your advertising spend was 0. Your brand awareness among target was 0%. In month 2, your advertising spend was $100,000, and your brand awareness among target was 3%. In month 3, your advertising spend was $100,000, and your brand awareness among target was 5%. In month 4, your advertising spend was $100,000, and your brand awareness among target was 6%. You can see that if you spend nothing on advertising, you won't have any brand awareness. But let's say that you start spending the same amount on advertising each month. Your brand awareness jumps to 3% in month 2, and then to 5% in month 3, but in month 4, your brand awareness only increases from 5% to 6%. You've invested the exact same amount, but you're getting less return for that investment. I took part of that table and pasted it into Excel. I then inserted a graph to be able to see this visually. Do you notice how the orange line gets less and less steep? That shows the diminishing returns you face with this brand campaign. And under that is a picture demonstrating that. There's an orange line that goes up steeply but then starts to level out and flatten. You need to decide as a team when it's time to pivot to maximize your returns.